Hey guys, it's Jay, here with another review video. Before the review begins, I'd like to ask if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and share with others. Without further ado, onto the vid. The episode begins with a transport ship flying over the ocean, as the captain says they will arrive in Port of Spain in 15 minutes. Inside, Shay looks at the classified document and says that he wouldn't have guessed Abel's name would be on the list. Gary chimes in and says no one would have, and the half of the cabinet is tainted as they all sided with the Shadow. He continues with, who knows why, out of fear or money, whatever their reasons, it makes no difference to me. They will all pay for betraying our home. Head Chancellor Abel has had underhanded dealings with them for some time it seems. I just know he has something to gain from it. What I don't understand is why Kaguya bowed to him. Something to do with a bloodline close to Thanatos? It's all blurry. Shay ponders about the second to last sentence Gary says, and thinks Abel may know where Thanatos hides. As a transport ship lands, Brandon announces Gary and Shay's arrival, and notes the unchecked political power in their nation's capital, and that it is far more sinister than one could imagine. And these two will spearhead the new plan to exterminate the vermin responsible. Gary greets everyone and extends his gratitude to Brandon for keeping things in order. He then says he is a minister no longer, as he lost that title with the betrayal, but that he was once their chief officer, and that he knows what they have heard of him should have broken their trust entirely, as even though he has been exonerated, the damage cannot be. But before he can finish his sentence, all the soldiers present salute him and say, "Welcome back, Minister Choi. It is an honor to work under you again, sir." They add that he was their commanding officer then, and he is the same man now, and that none standing there believed his charges when they were announced, and finished by asking to please allow them to serve under him again. Brandon then brings Gary his battle uniform, who then says, "Code should have briefed you on what really took place 8 months ago. 5 members of the legislature have committed acts of treason. You were told I was responsible for the bombing, but the mass murder of several thousands of our citizens was orchestrated by Abel Legasov and ministers Sonia Olsen, Dante Smith, Rajani Bharat, and Amari Green. It was a business transaction with the Shadow and his men, an illegal alliance that so cowardly visits our island ever so often. The institution of our government has fallen. That leaves us, the military, as the only law that remains. Now I will hunt those responsible. They will all wish they hadn't been born. My home, no, our home, has been overtaken by wild dogs who clad themselves in suits and sit at the heads of our tables. These dogs left no scraps, yet that was never enough for them. They began to feast on their own people, growing fat on their flesh. Truthfully, it would be wise to remove myself from this investigation after 8 months in chains, but my code of ethics died in that cell." The troops are then told to round up, as where the minister goes, they follow. And as this is said, Tevin sees Shay. Shay is surprised to see his brother, and Tevin says they have a problem. Shay asks where Yukiko is, but Tevin says that's the problem, as they've been waiting on details since they arrived, as they cannot locate Yukiko or Azam. He says there were Titans there, and that the last transaction recorded said Azam neutralized the foe and that they are awaiting evac, but they've lost communication. He says the Greyhounds are heading there soon, and that he and Shay will go ahead, as they know where they're supposed to be, but it seems like they just vanished. Brendan walks over and says he's been keeping up with the team on site, and adds that they've been updating him every 3 minutes. He says there's still no sign of them, and he questions if they took shelter in a building with no signal. Tevin then asks about Chi's signatures, and Brandon says they just pinged an Amber Alert. His eyes then widen as Tevin questions him, and Brandon responds that they checked the database for the last Chi signature that recorded before Yukiko and Azam vanished, and the Chi that showed up on the scanners belonged to the Shadow. At those words, Shay and Tevin take off while using their respective talents, and as this occurs, Brandon tells all the troops to report to transport immediately, as a god-tier level threat was detected at a site previously determined to be secure, and to follow their Kimyo lead. The scene then changes to a transport ship in Schiehallion, Scotland, over the Munros Mountains. Grimbor instructs the pilot where to land, as another member of the first table is seen on the ground. Eric says, "Impossible. It should not be here. These readings make no sense. When I first detected the signals, I didn't believe it myself until I came out here. Why would you show up now? We've searched for you for years. All of a sudden you reveal yourself?" The other members of the first table then walk out of the transport ship, and Grimoire calls out to Eric. Junie comments on the beauty of the mountains, and adds that it would be romantic if they weren't in battle outfits and dirty boots. Eric adds that they do need a vacation, but Grimoire cuts in and says he'd prefer retirement. He adds that Eric's SOS said it it was urgent, and that they came as soon as possible, and he asks what it is. Eric tells him to look at the charts and tell him what he sees. Grimoire says he's been following a specific signal, and it's led him to this spot, and that it seems to have been generated from these mountains. He then asks what that means for them. Eric says it means this place should be Code's top priority. Junie then asks what it is exactly he tracked there, and as he looks toward an abandoned Code mining site, he says, "A weapon, Junie, the Merlin Stone, a talent object older than Thanatos himself. It was a key instrument to his reign thousands of years ago, and no one knows when it arrived on Earth. It possesses a void talent. Within that stone lies a realm large enough to house an entire kingdom. It is a portal to another world called the Merlin Dimension. Whoever wields the stone possesses the ability to move freely between our reality and the one inside the stone. We believe time functions differently there. One of the original Thanatos vessels found it. He used it to hide his entire company in the Merlin Dimension. The stone itself is the key, and its wielder the doorway. Once in hand, its user can enter this void and exit anywhere on this planet they choose. Its potential is endless." Tandor says in Code's archives, Malhazar was buried with the stone, and that he instructed his family to conceal his tomb and place the stone within it, and adds that the mining site must have disturbed it, so Malhazar's tomb must be in those mountains. He also adds that the readings indicate the stone is right beneath them. Grimoire says Code farmed minerals for years at the site, but abandoned it after 2 decades, and asks why the stone didn't release any chi during the entire operation. He says 20 years of workers in and out of the site, yet the stone went undetected until now. Tandor says perhaps it was dormant, and that Kane searched for it, but that would be the last place he'd look for it. He adds that once again Malhazar won them another advantage. Junie says that Thanatos may be strong, but his fear of being ambushed by powerful Kimyos led him to hide routinely, and that hiding in the Merlin Dimension helped him evade capture until Lord Malhazar broke the cycle. She then asks what Eric's next move is, as she assumes finding and securing the stone is top priority. Eric confirms this by saying correct. He then adds that Thanatos has gone years without it, but he knows he greatly desires to get his hands on it once again, and if they detected his chi, so has he, and he assures them that that will not be an easy battle, so they must move quickly. Grimoire adds that they must get a message to Lord Hart immediately. Tandor agrees with Jin and adds that Code's confidentiality has been breached, so there are few they can trust with this. As he says this, a small purple portal appears behind them, and as Eric turns around, Thanatos is seen stepping out of it. As he speaks, he says, "The first table. I've desired to meet you so that I can feel the weight of your chi." Tandor sees him and comments on his acquisition of the Merlin Stone, and Thanatos continues with, "You see the stone? Yes. I too was shocked when it revealed itself, but you seem to have been far too slow in arriving here. I knew its presence would draw you all here as moths to a flame, and I would be generous enough to allow you to see it with your own eyes. And besides, I've been feeding off the chi of these weak soldiers. The generations truly have grown fragile, but your chi, First Table, will bring me closer to my former glory." Now onto the highlights. So there are 2 main subjects I'll be looking at, with 1 or 2 subpoints that relate to them. The first subject is going to be Gary Ochoy himself. Now Gary, during all of Season 2, showed us he was a man who knows right from wrong, and wanted to do things in the proper way. As in episode 68, Gary is more furious than anyone about Abel's idea to blow up the stadium, but due to their law, he couldn't do anything against him until his bill was finished. And this is also why he is quick to want answers from him in episode 110, and why Abel makes it clear that he did not break any laws, as the law is clearly important to Gary. However, it seems as though this more by-the-book mentality is no longer a part of Gary, as he says his code of ethics died in the cell. Now, I think this will result in something major, but before I get into that, I want to look at the names that were on the list. So the names on the list ended up being ones I mentioned in my episode 128 review, with those being the people who sided with Abel at the end of Season 2. And this was obvious, as there's no reason for it to be anyone else. Now, it's clear Gary will be hunting these individuals down, as he says they will pay for betraying their home. And Brandon says he will be a part of the plan to exterminate the vermin responsible for the unchecked political power in their capital. Not to mention Gary himself also says he will hunt them. The letter says those on the list have been allowed a formal hearing, as their rights have been acknowledged. However, I think due to Gary's change in ethics will lead him to personally end these individuals' lives. Now that may be a bit extreme, but he has a reasonable grudge against them and may not feel a simple hearing is enough for them to get what they deserve. Regardless of how this turns turns out, I think Gary's changing code of ethics is what leads Trinidad to be under martial law in the future. If you don't think this is the case, Gary says something that almost directly leads to this being true. He says, "The institution of our government has fallen. That leaves us, the military, as the only law that remains." This should directly imply Gary is part of the reason Trinidad is under martial law in the year 2027 that we see in episode 45. Now, martial law is usually declared when civilian authorities have ceased to function effectively or when a major threat to public safety exists. Both of these things apply here, as 5 members of their government turned on it, and said incident caused the other members to be retired early. Not to mention, one of them died as a result of gathering the truth. The threat to public safety exists from the prior Brian Lara Stadium incident where thousands of Kimyo civilians were murdered. However, this isn't really all, as Trinidad has been a hotspot for threats since Season 1 with the Titans, not to mention the multiple Gaki that were on their soil in Season 2, as well as currently where Azam had to fight a Titan and Lewis having to fend off the biggest threat to human safety. And since it's clear Trinidad will get aid from Code, it's easy to see how someone like Gary would be in charge of this country's security and given proper resources to ensure its safety. Now, this next section will be quick and has no relation to Gary, but the scene of Shay and Tevin. It seems as though people are surprised at how fast Tevin actually is in comparison to Shay, and at first I was too, but that soon went away when I realized Tevin has been somewhat relative to Shay since Season 1. Now, of course, Shay is stronger than him now, and that gap started during Season 2, and Tevin even says to Shay in episode 92 that Shay has always been ahead of him and he mustn't let that gap continue to close. Part of this will refer to Shay's combat abilities, as Tevin in episode 4 says Leo always acknowledged Shay as the brightest when it comes to combat, and Shay gaining the Ilios talent only further enhanced this. But Tevin in Season 1 is able to keep pace with Shay while they fight Rokash before Shay uses Ilios State combat mode, showing how at the very least this version of Rhino Hide compares to this version of base Shay. Season 2 furthers this by showing us Tevin keeping pace with a fatigued War State Shay while in Lion Hide. Lion Hide is of course faster than Rhino Hide, as Tevin himself implies this in episode 19, so it makes sense that a stronger version of the Hide can keep up with a fatigued Shay in his stronger state. We also know it's stronger in Season 2, as Ryu directly compares the chi of it when Tevin activates it to that of a Titan General, and Tevin would not be able to beat Ryu as his Season 1 self. Keeping all of this in mind, and using Tevin's statement to Shay, we can guess that to some capacity, Tevin trained with this stronger version of Shay in mind as a way to close the aforementioned gap, and with 8 months to do so, along with 3 highs to do it with, I wouldn't be surprised if he did in a manner of speaking. And even if he didn't train with Shay in mind, they have been near relatives since Season 1. Rhino Hide is also Tevin's base, so to speak, as he doesn't get any faster from it, as durability is the highest special trait. So this is Tevin's raw speed in comparison to base Shay's Ilios enhanced flight speed. The next major thing I want to look at is the Merlin Stone. Now, the Merlin Stone was said by Eric to be a talent object older than Thanatos himself, and considering the Thanatos talent and the other Great Four are seen as the first Kimyo, this should mean the Merlin Stone is the first talent object to ever exist. And since Eric also says they don't know when it arrived on Earth, which means they can't accurately carbon date it, there's a possibility it didn't just appear on Earth like other talent objects, but more than likely came from outer space. The stone itself is quite strong, as it possesses a void talent that grants its user access to a realm within the stone. This dimension, as said by Eric, is large enough to house an entire kingdom. Now, this statement is quite interesting, as it could mean the realm is large enough to house a kingdom as big as the British Empire, which is considered the largest kingdom in history, spanning 13.71 million square miles. Though of course the dimension could be far smaller than that, and due to its name, may even be of the same size as what Camelot would have been. Regardless of the dimension size, when it's used, the wielder can exit the dimension anywhere on the planet they choose. This is how Thanatos appears in front of the first table members, as before this he was in the dimension, and before that at Malhazar's tomb. Eric also believes the dimension's time flows differently. If this is true, this by itself gives the stone great value. If the stone's time functions similar to that of the hyperbolic time chamber, whether that be the one on Earth or the one Goku trained with Mirasin, that means an absurd amount of things could get done. If you needed something constructed, you could do so in the dimension and bring it back to the real world already made, as if it took no time at all to build. Or the even better use, it could also allow any Kimyo to understand their abilities in less time than it would take normally, allowing them to come out much stronger and experienced than what they went in as exactly like the hyperbolic time chamber. The stone itself is also quite important to Thanatos users, as it is a guaranteed way to keep him safe. As Junie says, his fear of being ambushed by powerful cameos led him to hide routinely. This statement gives us a better understanding as to why Kane was hard to find, as he more than likely put lots of resources into being hidden. And this adds on to what Jamie says in season 1, with him saying Kane was supposed to be hiding overseas and that they've been trying to locate him for years. Holder also says Kane searched for the stone, but of course he never found it. And this further proves Malhazar came before Kane, for anyone who is still unsure of that fact. Junie's statement also further explains why Abel was in hiding. Outlined in episode 116, his strength is not up to par with some of the higher tier characters as of right now, as he directly says his strength has waned, which only reinforces the God Tier's oath we learned about in episode 128, which means enough strong cameos on their level can deal with Thanatos. And because of this, he uses the soldiers to get stronger, but in this episode he outlines how their chi is not enough, but those of the first tables will be, as he says they will bring him closer to his former glory. This statement makes me rethink how the chi of the Thanatos talent works. While Shay is an anomaly who can access the chi of the ether through his body and is able to use that chi to enhance his physical prowess, Abel works differently. The Thanatos talent has chi at a base, as we see a young Kane is able to destroy surrounding buildings, and we know the talent can grow ever stronger by way of absorbing souls and chi. Due to the body's connection to the ether realm, and the talent itself being what accesses that chi, Abel has to absorb souls and chi to access more of the chi inside the realm. And this is why Thanatos says in episode 24 he has no power on his own, as he needs the chi of others to access the chi his talent is actually connected to. If I had to simplify it even further, think of the chi of the ether when used by the Thanatos talent as a massive supply of food hidden behind multiple doors, and the chi the wielder takes from others as keys to those doors. The more keys he has, aka the more chi he takes, allows him to open the door to the food, aka more access to his own innate chi. Now with that out of the way, I want to quickly look at Malhazar's tomb. Now, Malhazar's tomb is located somewhere in the Munros Mountains, and the Hart clan are more than likely the only ones who knew this, as Holder explains that Code's archives say Malhazar instructed his family to conceal his tomb and place the Merlin Stone within it, and this is how the stone evaded Kane, though it is very possible something else exists within his tomb. Now, what I'm about to talk about next can be seen as a spoiler, though it technically isn't. So for those who would like to remain unaware of what I'm about to discuss, go ahead and skip to the outro section of the video. For those who did stay, let me break this subject down from the beginning. Now, a while back, Faceless Eternal asked Brent himself if Malhazar's sword was still around, with his answer being yes. With this information, we know the weapon of a clear notable character still exists, but don't know where it is. I propose that it makes the most sense for his sword to be in his tomb as well, as the hearts are adjacent to samurai and how they seem to operate, so their founder's signature weapon being buried with him makes sense, as this was a practice of samurai in our history. The weapon itself could also possess a talent, however, there is no evidence for this outside of the fact that the season is highlighting talent objects and weapons. But the weapon of the founder of the Hart clan, the same clan that seemed to be above all the other families in the series possessing a talent, doesn't seem too impossible. Now, if this is all true, there is only one character I see potentially getting this weapon, and that is Andrea. You could argue Yukiko should get it, however she already has the blades of her father, and I feel as though her ancestors' swords wouldn't fit the style of combat she has portrayed. Andrea, on the other hand, can master any weapon she touches, so combat style is not a problem for her. And as we all know, she is no longer in possession of Noragiri, now known as Zahara, which was her strongest weapon without a doubt. And as I expressed in my episode 125 review, because of this, she will need a new weapon that rivals Zahara's strength to put her on par with these higher tier characters. I originally proposed this could be one of the Tenkagoken, but Malhazar's sword might make more thematic sense. Keep in mind, Andrea is the fiance of the current head of the Hart clan, which would make her a Hart by marriage in the future. And due to the nature of Shay's proposal to her, with him saying he promises to keep her blade sharp, I could see him allowing her to possess the blade of his ancestor, especially if the first table gets word to him that Malhazar's tomb is there. This could very well lead Shay to the mountains in search of Malhazar's tomb, to potentially unlock any other hidden secrets he has in there. Though of course this is all speculation, and Brent could do something completely different with the sword or not use it at all. To end things off, I want to shout out Anthony Dice, as his guess on the episode was correct, though I wasn't expecting to see Brennan and Tevin back in Trinidad, as I thought we might see Tevin deal with something involving the pirates on his own. However, due to this scene of Tevin and Shay taking off, I'm guessing we'll see a Shay and Vale interaction, and fight, with maybe Tevin assisting. You could also say Tevin would fight Kaguya instead of helping Shay, which could mean we might see a Black Mask Kaguya versus a Blacksmith's Forge High Tevin, which would be a spectacle. We should also be getting an Abel versus the Pillars fight, as it's very clearly implied he wants their chi, but also due to Shay's mission of having them locate Thanatos. This will be very cool to see, as we will be witnessing 4 new talents on display, as well as how this incarnation of Thanatos will wield the power he has. I also wanted to quickly point out that the list of names has references to other anime, with them being Demon Slayer, Bleach, Naruto, and One Piece. It's also possible the name of Jeff is a reference to Jeff the Landshark from Marvel. And lastly, for the comments of the week, I would like to put a spotlight on Tie the Knot, who comments on how the first table better give Thanatos a run for his money, and asks where the god tier are, as Thanatos is quite literally right there. This comment is honestly really funny to me, because everything about it is exactly how we should all feel. I also just really hope the Pillars do well against Thanatos, as they are probably my favorite group in the series. But anyway, that's the video guys. Let me know what your favorite part of the chapter was in the comments below, as well as how you feel about the things I mentioned in the highlight section. Don't forget to read the actual episode for yourself, and be sure to like it as well. And I will see y'all in the next one.